Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Art from Fantasia. I am a digital artist. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can composite these images to create amazing photo manipulation. And if you want to work on these images, you will find the link in description below. You can download from there. And if you are new at my channel, then don't forget to hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon for more interesting Photoshop tutorials. So without further wasting any time, let's get started. And first let me show you the final result, then let's get into the Photoshop. Let's start with this cool forest image as a background that I downloaded from unsplash.com. First, duplicate this layer by pressing Ctrl plus J, and then add this layer into the group by pressing Ctrl plus Z and rename it background or whatever you like. And right click on this layer and then click on convert to smart object. So now you can see this will convert the image into smart object, and then select the crop tool by pressing C, or you can select from the toolbar menu on the left side by clicking on the crop tool icon and then crop it like this, and then just simply hit enter on the keyboard to crop the image. Okay, now press Ctrl plus T to transform it and make this image a little bit bigger, and drag up a little bit, and now I think it looks good to me, and I'm going to leave it there. Now just simply hit enter on keyboard. Okay, now press Ctrl plus J to duplicate this layer, and then right click on this layer, click on rasterize layer. Now select the lasso tool by pressing L, or you can select any selection tool to make the selection of this tree. So now I'm going to remove this tree because it looks a little bit distracting to me, and you can leave it there if you like. After the selection, right click and then click on fill. Now opacity to 100% and select the content aware option and then click on OK. So now you have to wait to complete the progress, and then you will see the tree will disappear after the progress. Okay, now it's done. Now you can see, now the image looking much better to me. If you don't like, you can leave the tree. Okay, now select and these two layer by holding shift, and then right click on convert to smart object, and again press Ctrl plus T to transform the image, and then make it even more little bit bigger, and then just drag up a little bit and hit enter. Okay, now it's looking good. Now I'm going to drag the model image into the Photoshop. Okay, now this is the image. Now press Ctrl plus G to add this layer into the group, and then rename the group model or whatever you like, and then make the selection of this model. You can use any selection tool you like, but I'm going to use the pen tool to make the selection of this model. Okay, now select the pen tool by pressing P on keyboard, and now take your time and then make the selection of the model. So now I'm going to speed up a little bit. And if you like this Photoshop tutorial, then make sure to hit the subscribe button to my channel and press the bell icon for more photo manipulation tutorial, and leave a like and comment below as well. Okay, now you can see I'm almost done with the selection. After the selection with the pen tool, you have to press Ctrl plus Enter on keyboard to make the selection. Okay, now I'm almost done. Now you have to press Ctrl plus Enter to make the selection. Okay, and now click on this mask icon at the bottom of the layer panel. Okay, now as you can see, I just removed the background of the model, but the edges does not look so good. So now I'm going to remove the edges. First you have to select the brush by pressing B and change the foreground color to black, and make sure to change the opacity to 100% and hardness to 96 to 99%. Okay, now just you have to paint on these white edges to remove them. Now take your time and then just simply paint on these edges to remove them. And again, I'm going to speed up a little bit so this video don't get too long. And if you accidentally erase the area that you don't want to erase it, you just have to simply change the foreground color to white and then paint on those areas that you want to bring them back. And now take your time to fix these white edges, and I'm going to leave these hairs as it is for now, and don't worry, I will fix them later. For now, just focus on these white edges. Okay, now I'm almost done with the edges. Now zoom out and see. Okay, now it's looking good. And now press Ctrl plus T to transform the image and make the image a little bit smaller, and drag down a little bit to make the image look like to make the model look like she is standing on the ground. And when you are done with the transforming, you have to simply hit enter on keyboard. Okay, I think now it looks good to me. Now I'm going to leave it there and simply hit enter on keyboard. Next, I'm going to match the highlight and the shadows of the model with the background using curves adjustment layer. Now click on this half circle icon at the bottom of the layer panel, click on curves, and first make sure to clip this curve layer to the below layer by clicking on this icon, and then click to create the point on this area and drag down a little bit to make the shadows a little bit darker, and then click at the bottom of this line and drag up a little bit to make the darkest area a little bit brighter, and then click on this area and drag up a little bit to make the highlight a little bit brighter. And if you are not familiar with the curve, there's a lot of tutorial on YouTube you can watch. Okay, now I think I'm going to leave it there. It looks good to me now. Now again click on this half circle icon, and then this time click on levels, and first clip it to the below layer, and then bring the right slider to the left to make the highlight little bit darker, and then bring the left slider to the right little bit to make the darkest area a little bit brighter, and then bring the middle point little bit to the right to make the midtones a little bit brighter. Okay, now move on to the next step. Now I'm going to match the color of the model with the background. Again click on this half circle icon, and this time click on hue and saturation, and select the red color and decrease the saturation of the red, and decrease the brightness little bit as well. And now you can see it's blending with the background, and you can experiment with these three slider and see what it's best to work for you, and just leave it there. And okay, let's see how it's look. Maybe I think it's I have to make the highlight little bit brighter. It's too dark. Okay, hold Alt and make sure to clip this layer to the below layer by holding Alt and click. Okay, and now press Ctrl plus T and move a little bit to the right. Okay, now it looks good. Now I'm going to select the levels and make sure to click on this mask icon and then select the soft round brush, make it smaller and opacity to 10 to 15% or 20, and foreground color black, and now paint on the highlight to make them a little bit brighter. And now take your time to paint the highlight where you think it's a little bit too dark on his face, and I think his arm is a little bit too dark as well, and on the edges. If you accidentally paint the highlight on the shadows and you want to remove it, you have to just change the foreground color to white and you can remove the highlight from the shadows. Okay, now I think it looks good to me and I'm going to leave it there. And now create a blank layer above these three layers by clicking on this create new layer icon and then change the blend mode to soft light. Now zoom out and hold Alt and click to take the sample from the background, and remember to take the sample from the brightest area on the background, and select the brush, soft round brush, opacity 10 to 20%, and make sure to clip this layer to the below layer by holding Alt and left click on the middle of these two layers. Now this will only affect the model layer, not the background. Okay, now you can see this will only affect on the model layers. Now take your time to paint the highlights on the model, on the edges and on her clothes, and just paint some highlights where you think light will definitely hit on the model. And if you accidentally paint too much highlights on the model and you want to erase them, just change the brush to eraser tool by pressing E, and you can decrease the opacity of the eraser tool and just remove the highlights where you want to remove them. And if you are using a graphic tablet, then it will be much easier to paint the highlights on the model with the graphic tablet. And I'm painting with the mouse. I think it will take some time to paint the highlights with the mouse, and I will highly recommend using a graphic tablet. Okay, now I think I'm almost done with the highlight. And now zoom out and see how it looks. Now press Ctrl plus 0 to zoom out, and you can see it will look much more realistic. Now it's time to paint rim light on the model. First create a new blank layer and make sure to clip this layer to the below layer and then change the blend mode to, but I think I will leave the rim light for later. Now just drag the fish image into the Photoshop. Okay, now that's the image. Now hit enter on keyboard and then press Ctrl plus G to add this layer into the group and rename it fish or whatever you like. And then select the quick selection tool by pressing W on keyboard, or you can select any other selection tool that you like to make the selection of the fish. To deselect this area, you have to hold Alt and click, and so now you can see I'm pretty much done with the selection. And now I'm going to click on this layer mask icon at the bottom of the layer panel and then press Ctrl plus T to transform it and then rotate a little bit. And now I'm going to place the fish here, and you can place it wherever you like, but I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to place the fish behind this tree. Okay, now press Ctrl plus T, and I think I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, and then simply hit enter on keyboard. To make the fish look like behind the tree, first I'm going to decrease the opacity of the fish, and then select the brush, and make sure to change the foreground color to black, and then change the and increase the opacity to 100% and hardness 98 or 99%, and then remove this area of the fish to make the fish look like behind this tree. And after erasing this area of the fish, increase the opacity to 100% and see. Okay, now you can see it's already looks much better. And now I'm going to fix these little areas, and now you can see this white area need to be filled. Now change the brush size, make it a little bit smaller, and then change the foreground color to white by pressing X key on keyboard, and then fill this area. Okay, now it's looks good. Now search for other areas like this and just paint on those areas. Okay, now I'm almost done. Now press Ctrl plus 0 to zoom out and see. And you can see it's looking pretty much good. And now I'm going to leave it there. And then click on this half circle icon, click on levels, and first make sure to clip this layer to the below layer by clicking on this icon, and then move this slider, but I think I'm going to leave the slider there. And then move the middle slider a little bit to the left, and then move this slider a little bit to the right. With this adjustment layer, you can see I just match the highlight and the shadows of the fish with the background, but it's a little bit too bright, but don't worry, I will fix it later. And next I'm going to match the color of the fish with the background. Again, click on this half circle icon at the bottom of the layer panel, and this time click on hue and saturation, and first make sure to clip this layer to the below layer, and then check this colorize box. And now move the hue slider and see how it's work. But I think I'm going to uncheck the colorize box, and then I will try. Okay, uncheck it, and then click on this hand icon, and then click on this color, and then drag to the left to decrease the saturation. And now you can see it's working, it's blending with the background. Okay, now leave it there, and then click this area, and then drag to the left to decrease the saturation color. Okay, now it's looking much better. And now increase the brightness a little bit. Again, click on this area and decrease saturation a little bit where it looks good to you, and then just leave it there. Now you can see it's looking much better. And now it's time to drag another fish image into the Photoshop, and now you can see this is the image. Now select the quick selection tool by pressing W on keyboard, or you can select any other selection tool to make the selection of this fish. And you don't need to be perfect on these edges because no one will notice those areas. And now zoom out and see how it's look. I think it will take some time to select these little areas, and to deselect those areas you have to hold Alt and click, and now you can see this will deselect areas. Now release the Alt key and you will select those areas again. And now you can see I'm almost done with the selection. Now press Ctrl plus 0 on keyboard to zoom out, and click on this mask icon at the bottom of the layer panel. and then press Ctrl plus T to transform it, and right click on flip horizontal, and make the fish a little bit smaller. It's too big, and I'm going to place the fish behind this tree, and you can place it wherever you like and make it even more smaller. Okay, now drag up a little bit and see. Okay, now drag down a little bit, and now I think I'm going to leave it there. It's looking good to me right there. And now zoom out, and now match the highlight and the shadows. Click on this half circle icon at the bottom of the layer panel, and then click on levels, and first make sure to clip this layer to the below layer. Then move the middle slider a little bit to the left to make the fish a little bit brighter, and move this slider to the right a little bit to make the darkest area a little bit brighter. And now you can see it's blending with the background. Okay, now it's looking good. Again, click on this half circle icon. Now this time click on hue and saturation, and then check this colorize box and clip this layer to the below layer. And now move the hue slider to the bluish and cyan color and decrease the saturation a little bit as well. And now you can see it's blending with the background. And now it's looking much better. And zoom in and click on this mask icon on the fish layer and decrease the opacity to 15 to 30%, so you can see the fish see the tree behind that fish. And select the brush and make sure to change the foreground color to black and opacity to 100%. And now remove and now erase this area of the fish, so it's look like the fish is behind that tree. And now it's done. Now zoom out and increase the opacity to 100%, and now you can see it's look like the fish is behind that tree. And now double click on this level adjustment layer and make the fish a little bit even more brighter. Now move this slider to the right and move the middle slider to the left a little bit, and now you can see it's blending with the background. And now I'm going to leave it there, and it's looking much better. Okay, now let's paint some shadows on the right fish, so it looks much more realistic. And now you can see it's looking too bright, so I'm going to make it a little bit darker. To paint the shadows, first create a new layer above the right fish layers. Create a new layer above this layer, click on create new layer icon and hold alt and clip it to the below layer. Okay, now zoom in and select the brush by pressing B on keyboard, and make sure you have selected the foreground color black to paint the shadows. And don't forget to change the blend mode to soft light. Okay, and then decrease the opacity to 5 to 10%, and now paint the shadows on where you think light will not hit. And now you can see bluish edges, so I think I did not fix them before, so I'm going to fix them now and then paint some shadows. Now click on mask icon on the fish layer and then select the brush and make sure to increase the opacity to 100% and hardness 98 or 99%, and change the foreground color to black to remove these bluish edges. I will paint the shadows after removing these edges. It looks a little bit distracting, so first I'm going to remove them. It's look like I'm done with removing these edges. Now press Ctrl plus 0 to zoom out, and now you can see it's looking much better. Okay, but the soft light blend mode not working on the white areas, so now you can see I'm going to paint the shadows on these white areas, and now it's not working. So I think I'm going to paint paint I'm going to paint the shadows on the new layer, normal layer. Okay, now click on create new layer icon at the bottom of the layer panel and clip it to the below layer by holding alt and click, and let's paint. But I think I'm going to paint the shadows with the curves layer. Now hold shift and click, select these two layers and press the delete button, and again click on this half circle icon at the bottom of the layer panel, click on curves, and now make the fish darker. Okay, drag this point down to make it darker. Again drag down a little bit this point as well. Okay, now you can see it's getting darker and darker. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Okay, now it's looking good. Okay, now press Ctrl plus I to inverse it. Now press Ctrl plus I, and now zoom in and select the brush by pressing B, and make sure to change the foreground color to white and decrease the opacity to 10 to 15%, and now change the foreground color to white by pressing X key on keyboard. Okay, now click on OK, and now paint the shadows, and now you can see it's working much better on these white areas. And now paint the shadows where you think light will not hit. And if you accidentally paint too much shadows on the some areas and you want to erase them, you just have to change the simply foreground color to black to paint the shadows. And next I'm going to paint the shadows and the highlights on the soft light blend mode layer, and click on create new layer icon and change the blend mode to soft light. And first make sure you to clip this layer to the below layer by holding alt and click, and then paint some shadows on this fish, and make sure you have selected the foreground color black to paint the shadows. To paint the highlights you have to change the foreground color to white. Okay, now let's change the foreground color to white, and now paint some highlights on these areas, because light will definitely hit down this area. Okay, it looks like now I'm done with highlight and the shadows. Now press Ctrl plus 0 to zoom out and see, and now you can see it's looking much better. And I think I'm going to decrease the saturation of the left fish. It's a little bit too saturated, and decrease the saturation and move the hue slider to the cyan, and now you can see it's looking much better now. Okay, now let's move on to the next step. Okay, and now expand the background group, and then click on the background layer. Okay, and then click on the half circle icon at the bottom of the layer panel, click on curves, and first clip it to the below layer. Now click and drag down a little bit this area, and click and drag up a little bit to give the background a little bit contrast. And you can see it's a little bit too dark. Now drag up a little bit this point, and now you can see it's looking much better. Okay, now I think I'm going to drag up a little bit, and now I'm going to leave it there. Okay, now it's looking good, and I'm going to leave it there. And now let's paint some fog on the background. I think it will look good with the fog. Okay, to paint the fog, first you have to create a new blank layer above all these layers, above all the layers. Okay, now click on create new layer icon at the bottom of the layer panel, and select the brush by pressing B on keyboard, and make the brush size little bit bigger, And before I paint the fog, first I think I have to fix the model hairs. Okay, to fix the hairs, expand the model group layer. Okay, to expand the model group layer, you have to click on this arrow icon to expand it, and now create a new layer below the model image layer. Click on create new layer icon, and now zoom in, and now you can see the hair edges are a little bit too hard. First I am going to make them a little bit softer. Okay, make the brush size smaller, and now click on the mask icon on the model image layer. Okay, now change the foreground color to black, and opacity to 100%, and make sure to hardness 0, and now uh, make these edges little bit softer. And if you accidentally erase the unwanted area and you want to bring them back, you just have to change the simply foreground color to white by pressing X key, and paint on those areas to bring them back. And now you can see I am done with the edges. Now select the blank layer that you created before for the hairs, and hold alt and take the sample from the hairs. Okay, now let's paint. Okay, first open the brush setting. Now click on this brush setting icon, and select the transfer option, and now from there select the fade. If you are using a graphic tablet, then you can select the pen pressure, and if you are using mouse, you have to select the fade option, and now change the value to 100. If you are using a mouse, then you have to select the fade option. If you are using a graphic tablet, then you can use the pen. You have to select the pen pressure, and now hold alt and click to take the sample from the hairs, and then paint some hairs. And you have to take the sample from the near the area where you will paint the hairs, and you have to take the sample regularly from the highlight and the shadows, and then paint some hairs. Now take your time to paint these hairs, and if you are using a graphic tablet, then it will be much easier to paint the hairs, and the hair will look much more realistic with the graphic tablet. And if you are using a mouse, then it will be little hard to paint these hairs, and I think it will take some time to paint the hairs. And you don't need to be perfect on these hairs, because no one will notice these hairs. Just paint some hairs so it's look much better. And now you can see I am pretty much done with the hairs. Now press Ctrl+0 to zoom out and see. Okay, now it looks good to me, and okay, now it looks fine. Next, now drag this layer, add this layer into the group layer, and then rename it hair or whatever you like. And now I'm going to make those fishes a little bit darker. The fishes are too bright. Now this is the fish. Now double click on the levels adjustment layer and drag the middle slider a little bit to the right to make this fish a little bit darker, and drag this slider a little bit and leave just the slider there. Okay, now click on this level adjustment layer and again bring the slider a little bit to the right, and just leave this slider there. It's too dark. Okay, now I think now it looks good. Okay, now I'm going to leave it there. Now it's looking much better. Now let's paint some highlights and the rim lights on the model. I think it will look good. To paint the highlight, create a new layer above this layer. Click on the create new layer icon at the bottom of the layer panel. Hold alt and click on middle of these two layers. Okay, now change the blend mode to soft light, and now zoom in and select the brush by pressing B on keyboard and make the brush size a little bit bigger. And now change the foreground color to white for painting the highlights, and decrease the opacity. And before you paint highlight, first make sure to change the brush setting. Now click on the brush setting icon, and if you are using a mouse, then uncheck this transfer option. And if you don't have a brush setting icon there, then you have to click on the Windows option on the top menu. From there you can click on the brush setting, and then you will get the brush setting on the right side. Now before you paint the highlight, first make sure to change the opacity to 10 to 15%. And now take your time to paint these highlights. And if you're using a graphic tablet, then it will be much easier to paint these highlights. And if you accidentally paint too much highlights on some areas and you want to erase them, so you have to change the brush tool to eraser tool by pressing E key on keyboard. And you can change the opacity of the eraser tool as well, and then you can erase the highlights. And now you will see the hair will not affected by these highlights, because hair layer is not linked with this layer. So now I'm going to drag this layer out of this group, and then hold Alt and clip this layer to the model group. And now you will see whatever I paint on this layer, this will only affect the model group layers, all the layers. And now take your time to paint all these highlights, and make all these highlights even little more brighter on her face, nose, cheeks and chin, and lips as well. And after that, make this shoulder even little more brighter. And after painting the highlights, I will paint the shadows as well. I will make all these shadows even a little more darker. And when you're painting the highlights and the shadows on the soft light blend mode, it's the same as dodging and burning. And right now I am dodging these highlights to make them even little more brighter. Okay, now I'm almost done with the highlights, and now let's paint some shadows to make them even little more darker. And to paint the shadows, first you have to change the foreground color to black. And now click on this icon to change the foreground color, and now make all these shadows even little more darker. And if you like this tutorial, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon for more Photoshop tutorials, and leave a like and comment below as well. And so now take your time to paint these shadows, make all these shadows even a little more darker. I think it takes some time to paint these highlights and the shadows with the mouse. And now make this area even a little more darker as well on the face. So after that I will paint the rim light as well. And now I'm almost done, and now zoom out and see. And now you can see it's looking much better. And now create a new layer above this layer, and hold Alt and clip this layer to the below layer, and then hold Alt and take the sample from the background on the brightest area. And now select the brush, increase the opacity to 100%, and make the brush size a little bit smaller. And now paint the highlights, paint the rim lights on the edges of the model. And you can paint with the low opacity brush tool, and right now I am painting with the 100% opacity, and later I will erase it with the low opacity brush. to decrease the intensity of the rim light to make it more realistic. Okay, now I'm almost done. Now I'm going to decrease the opacity of the brush, and now hold tilde key on keyboard to erase it with the brush. So if you hold the tilde key, then you don't have to select the eraser tool, and you can select the eraser tool as well and decrease the opacity to 11%. And so I'm just holding a tilde key to erase it with the brush, and you can select the eraser tool as well and decrease the opacity. So when you're holding a tilde key, then you don't need to select the eraser tool. You can erase with this brush by holding the tilde key. And now I am almost done with the rim light, and now you can see it's looking much better. It's looking really good right now. And next I will paint some fog on the background as well. So now press Ctrl+0 to zoom out, and now you can see it looks really good right now. Okay, now I'm going to add these three layers into the group. Hold shift and select these three layers and press Ctrl+Z and rename this group model or whatever you like, and expand the background group and create a new layer above this layer by clicking on this icon. And now hold Alt and take the sample from the background on the brightest area and change the blend mode to screen, and make the brush size a little bit bigger, opacity to 11%, and now paint some fog on the background. Okay, if you accidentally paint too much fog on the background and you want to erase it, so you can select the eraser tool and decrease the opacity of the eraser tool as well. And if you don't want to select the eraser tool, you can erase it with the brush by holding a tilde key. So this way you don't have to select the eraser tool. And now you can see I am holding a tilde key to erase this fog. And next I will paint some fog, or you can call it some light, on the model to blend with the background on the screen blend mode layer. Okay, now I am going to select this layer that I created before and change the blend mode to screen. Okay, now paint some fog on the model, some light or some fog to blend with the background. And you can see it's too much, so first I'm going to decrease the opacity. Now zoom in, and now you can see. So let's decrease the opacity to 9%, but again it's too much, so let's decrease it more, 2%, 2 to 5% you can. And now you can see it looks really good. It looks much more realistic right now. Paint some fog on the some light on the edges, and hold the tilde key to erase it if it's too much, or you can select the eraser tool. Now paint some fog other areas as well on the background, and now you can see it looks much more realistic right now, and the model is blending with the background. And next I will paint the shadows as well of the model on the ground. To paint the shadows, I will create a new adjustment layer below this fog layer. Okay, and now click on this half circle icon and then click on levels, and make sure to clip this layer to the below layer, and then bring this middle slide a little bit to the right to make the background a little bit darker to paint the shadows. And then just leave this slider there and then bring this slide a little bit to the right as well. Okay, now press Ctrl plus I to inverse it and then rename it shadows or whatever you like. And now click on this mask icon and then change the foreground color to white to paint the shadows. And then now increase the opacity to 100% and then paint the shadows to this direction, because light is hitting from the back and a little bit to the right side, and I did not find any hard shadows on the background to paint with, and you can paint however you want. And now you can see the shadows are too strong, and now I'm going to erase it with the low opacity brush. Now decrease the opacity to 11% and then hold the tilde key on keyboard. Okay, now hold the tilde key on keyboard and then erase it to make this shadow a little bit brighter to blend with the background. And now you can see it's getting much better and it's looking much more realistic. And to erase it, you can select the eraser tool as well and decrease the opacity of the eraser tool and just erase it with the eraser tool. And I am erasing with the brush by holding tilde key on keyboard, and to paint again you have to release the key. And I'm not going to paint any strong shadows because you can see on the background there are not any hard shadows or strong shadows, and I just want to blend this with the background, with the whole image. And now I think I'm going to just leave it there. It looks much better right now. It looks really good. Next I will paint some shadows on the model. I think it's a little bit too bright, and I'm going to erase some fog from the model. I think it's a little bit too much as well. Okay, now let's see. Now hide this layer and see, and now you can see it's a little bit too much, and I'm going to erase this fog a little bit from the model. Okay, now select the brush, or you can select the eraser tool as well, and change the foreground color to white. Or okay, now take the sample from the brightest area on the background by holding Alt key and then decrease the opacity to 10 to 15%, and to erase the fog you have to hold the tilde key on keyboard and paint again. To paint again you have to release the tilde key, and now I'm holding a tilde key to erase this fog. So this way I don't have to select the eraser tool, and I'm just erasing it with the brush, normal brush, by holding a tilde key. And now I think I am almost done. And now I'm going to create a new adjustment layer to paint the shadows on the model. I think it's a little bit too bright as well, and now I'm going to just leave it there. And now click on this offset icon at the bottom of the layer panel and then click on exposure. Okay, now this is it. And okay, you don't have to clip this layer to the below layer, so make the whole image a little bit darker. I think now it looks good. And now press Ctrl plus I to inverse it and then paint some shadows on the model to make it a little bit darker. I think paint some shadows on the highlight as well to make it a little bit darker. It's too bright. And the next step will be our final step in camera filter for this edit. And for now I think it's looking good, and now I'm going to just leave it there. Now press Ctrl Shift Alt plus E to merge all these layers into one image, and then go to camera raw filter. Okay, now click on filter and then camera raw filter to open the camera raw filter tab. And if you are using older version of Photoshop, then the interface of the camera raw filter will be a little different. And don't worry, you have what you need for the same result. And now follow the same setting to get the same result. And you can also experiment with all these slider and see how it's best work for you. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and make sure to hit the subscribe button and press the bell icon for more photo manipulation Photoshop tutorials, and leave a like and comment below as well. And see you in the next tutorial. And if you have any question on your mind or something you don't understand in this tutorial, then let me know in the comment below. Okay, now I am pretty much done with it, and now click on OK. And if you like this one, you can leave it there, or if it looks too much bluish color on this image, then you can follow this setting on the camera raw filter to get the little bit different effect.